Cambridge is a city in Middlesex County, Massachusetts, United States, in the Boston metropolitan area, situated directly north of the city of Boston, across the Charles River. It was named in honor of the University of Cambridge in the United Kingdom, and an important center of the Puritan theology embraced by the town's founders. Cambridge is home to two of the world's most prominent universities, Harvard University and the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Cambridge has also been home to Radcliffe College, once one of the leading colleges for women in the United States before it merged with Harvard. According to the 2010 census, the city's population was 105,162. As of July 2014, it was the fifth most populous city in the state, behind Boston, Worcester, Springfield and Lowell. Cambridge was one of the two seats of Middlesex County prior to the abolition of county government in 1997. Lowell was the other. History. The site for what would become Cambridge was chosen in December 1630, because it was located safely upriver from Boston Harbor, which made it easily defensible from attacks by enemy ships. Thomas Dudley, his daughter Anne Bradstreet, and her husband Simon, were among the first settlers of the town. The first houses were built in the spring of 1631. The settlement was initially referred to as the New Town. Official Massachusetts records show the name capitalized as Newtown by 1632 and a single word Newton by 1638. Located at the first convenient Charles River crossing west of Boston, Newtown was one of a number of towns founded by the 700 original Puritan colonists of the Massachusetts Bay Colony under Governor John Winthrop. Its first preacher was Thomas Hooker, who led many of its original inhabitants west to found the Connecticut colony. Before leaving, however, they sold the plots to more recent immigrants from England. The original village site is in the heart of today's Harvard Square, the marketplace where farmers brought in crops from surrounding towns to sell survives today as the small park at the corner of John F. Kennedy and Winthrop Streets, then at the edge of a salt marsh and since filled. The town included a much larger area than the present city, with various outlying parts becoming independent towns over the years. Cambridge Village in 1688, Cambridge Farms in 1712 or 1713, and Littler South Cambridge and Menotomy West Cambridge in 1807. In the late 19th century, various schemes for annexing Cambridge itself to the city of Boston were pursued and rejected. In 1636, the new college was founded by the colony to train ministers. Newtown was chosen for the site of the college by the Great and General Court primarily, according to Cotton Mather, to be near the popular and highly respected Puritan preacher Thomas Shepard. In May 1638, the name of the settlement was changed to Cambridge in honor of the university in Cambridge, England. Hooker and Shepard, Newton's ministers, and the college's first president, major benefactor, and first schoolmaster were all Cambridge alumni, as was the colony's governor John Winthrop. In 1629, Winthrop had led the signing of the founding document of the city of Boston, which was known as the Cambridge Agreement. After the university, it was Governor Thomas Dudley who, in 1650, signed the charter creating the corporation which still governs Harvard College. Cambridge grew slowly as an agricultural village 8 miles by road from Boston, the capital of the colony. By the American Revolution, most residents lived near the Common and Harvard College, with farms and estates comprising most of the town. Most of the inhabitants were descendants of the original Puritan colonists, but there was also a small elite of Anglican worthies who were not involved in village life, who made their livings from estates, investments, and trade, and lived in mansions along the road to Watertown. Coming up from Virginia, George Washington took command of the volunteer American soldiers camped on Cambridge Common on July 3, 1775, now reckoned the birthplace of the U.S. Army. Most of the Tory estates were confiscated after the Revolution. On January 24, 1776, Henry Knox arrived with artillery captured from Fort Ticonderoga, which enabled Washington to drive the British Army out of Boston. Between 1790 and 1840, Cambridge began to grow rapidly, with the construction of the West Boston Bridge in 1792, that connected Cambridge directly to Boston, making it no longer necessary to travel 8 miles through the Boston Neck, Roxbury, and Brookline to cross the Charles River. A second bridge, the Canal Bridge, opened in 1809 alongside the new Middlesex Canal. The new bridges and roads made what were formerly estates and marshland into prime industrial and residential districts. In the mid-19th century, Cambridge was the center of a literary revolution when it gave the country a new identity through poetry and literature. Cambridge was home to some of the famous fireside poets, so called because the poems would often be read aloud by families in front of their evening fires. In the day, the fireside poets, Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, James Russell Lowell, and Oliver Wendell Holmes, were as popular and influential as rock stars are today. Soon after turnpikes were built, the Cambridge and Concord Turnpike, the Middlesex Turnpike, and what are today's Cambridge, Maine, and Harvard streets were roads to connect various areas of Cambridge to the bridges. In addition, the town was connected to the Boston and Amp Main Railroad, leading to the development of Porter Square as well as the creation of neighboring town Somerville from the formerly rural parts of Charlestown. Cambridge was incorporated as a city in 1846. This was despite noticeable tensions between East Cambridge, Cambridgeport, and Old Cambridge that stemmed from differences in each area's culture, sources of income, and the national origins of the residents. The city's commercial center began to shift from Harvard Square to Central Square, which became the downtown of the city around this time. Between 1850 and 1900, Cambridge took on much of its present character, streetcar suburban development along the turnpikes, with working-class and industrial neighborhoods focused on East Cambridge, comfortable middle-class housing being built on old estates in Cambridgeport and Mid-Cambridge, and upper-class enclaves near Harvard University and on the minor hills of the city. The coming of the railroad to North Cambridge and Northwest Cambridge then led to 3 major changes in the city. The development of massive brickyards and brickworks between Massachusetts Avenue, Concord Avenue, and Alewife Brook, the ice-cutting industry launched by Frederick Tudor on Fresh Pond, and the carving up of the last estates into residential subdivisions to provide housing to the thousands of immigrants that arrived to work in the new industries. For many decades, the city's largest employer was the New England Glass Company, founded in 1818. By the middle of the 19th century it was the largest and most modern glassworks in the world. In 1888, all production was moved by Edward Drummond Libby to Toledo, Ohio, where it continues today under the name Owens, Illinois. Flint glassware with heavy lead content, produced by the company, is prized by antique glass collectors today. There is none on public display in Cambridge, but there is a large collection in the Toledo Museum of Art. There are also a few pieces in the Museum of Fine Arts, Boston, and in the Sandwich Glass Museum on Cape Cod. By 1920, Cambridge was one of the main industrial cities of New England, with nearly 100 120,000 residents. Among the largest businesses located in Cambridge during the period of industrialization was the firm of Carter's Ink Company, whose neon sign long adorned the Charles River and which was for many years the largest manufacturer of ink in the world. Next door was the Athenaeum Press. Confectionery and snack manufacturers in the Cambridge Port area for Kendall Corridor included the Kennedy Biscuit Factory, Necco, Squirrel Brands, George Close Company, Daggett Chocolate, Fox Cross Company, Kendall Confectionery Company, and James O. Welch. In the 2010s, only the Cambridge Brands subsidiary of Tootsie Roll Industries remains in town, still manufacturing Junior Mints in the old Welch factory on Main Street. The Blake & Knowles Steam Pump Company and the Kendall Boiler and Tank Company and the New England Glass Company were among the industrial manufacturers in what are now the Kendall Square and East Cambridge neighborhoods. As industry in New England began to decline during the Great Depression and after World War II, Cambridge lost much of its industrial base. It also began the transition to being an intellectual, rather than an industrial, center. Harvard University had always been important in the city, but it began to play a more dominant role in the city's life and culture. When Radcliffe College was established in 1879, the town became a mecca for some of the nation's most academically talented female students. Also, the move of the Massachusetts Institute of Technology from Boston in 1916 ensured Cambridge's status as an intellectual center of the United States. After the 1950s, the city's population began to decline slowly, as families tended to be replaced by single people and young couples. The 1980s brought a wave of high-technology startups, creating software such as VisiCalc and Lotus 1, 2, 3, and advanced computers. But many of these companies fell into decline with the fall of the minicomputer and DOS-based systems. The city continues to be home to many startups. Kendall Square continued to be a major software hub through the dot-com boom and today hosts offices of major technology companies including Google, Microsoft, Amazon.com, and Akamai. In 1976, Harvard's plans to start experiments with recombinant DNA led to a 3-month moratorium and a citizen review panel. In the end, Cambridge decided to allow such experiments but passed safety regulations in 1977. This led to regulatory certainty and acceptance when Biogen opened a lab in 1982, in contrast to hostility which caused the Genetic Institute to abandon Somerville and Boston for Cambridge. The biotech and pharmaceutical industries have since thrived in Cambridge, which now includes headquarters for Biogen and Genzyme and laboratories for Novartis, Teva, Takeda, Alnylam, Ironwood, Catabasis, Moderna Therapeutics, Editas Medicine, and support companies such as Cytal, and many smaller companies. By the end of the 20th century, Cambridge had one of the most expensive housing markets in the northeastern United States, while maintaining much diversity in class, race, and age. It became harder and harder for those who grew up in the city to be able to afford to stay. The end of rent control in 1994 prompted many Cambridge renters to move to housing that was more affordable in Somerville and other communities. As of 2012, Cambridge's mix of amenities and proximity to Boston has kept housing prices relatively stable despite the bursting of the United States housing bubble. Cambridge has been a sanctuary city since 1985 and reaffirmed its status as such in 2006. Geography. According to the United States Census Bureau, Cambridge has a total area of 7.1 square miles, of which 6.4 square miles is land and 0.7 square miles is water. Adjacent municipalities. Cambridge is located in eastern Massachusetts, bordered by the city of Boston to the south and east. the city of Somerville to the north, the town of Arlington to the northwest, the town of Belmont and the city of Watertown to the west. The border between Cambridge and the neighboring city of Somerville passes through densely populated neighborhoods which are connected by the MBTA Red Line. Some of the main squares, Inman, Porter, and to a lesser extent, Harvard and Lechmere, are very close to the city line, as are Somerville's Union and Davis squares. Neighborhood squares. Cambridge has been called the City of Squares by some, as most of its commercial districts are major street intersections known as squares. Each of the squares acts as a neighborhood center. These include Kendall Square, formed by the junction of Broadway, Main Street, and 3rd Street, is also known as Technology Square, a name shared with an office and laboratory building cluster in the neighborhood. Just over the Longfellow Bridge from Boston, at the eastern end of the MIT campus, it is served by the Kendall MIT station on the MBTA Red Line subway. Most of Cambridge's large office towers are located here, giving the area somewhat of an office park feel. A flourishing biotech industry has grown up around this area. The Cambridge Innovation Center, a large co-working space, is located in Kendall Square at 1 Broadway. The Cambridge Center office complex is located in Kendall Square and not at the actual center of Cambridge. The 1 Kendall Square complex is nearby, but, confusingly, not actually in Kendall Square. Central Square, formed by the junction of Massachusetts Avenue, Prospect Street, and Western Avenue, is well known for its wide variety of ethnic restaurants. As recently as the late 1990s it was rather run down. It underwent a controversial gentrification in recent years, and continues to grow more expensive. It is served by the Central Station stop on the MBTA Red Line subway. Lafayette Square, formed by the junction of Massachusetts Avenue, Columbia Street, Sydney Street, and Main Street, is considered part of the Central Square area. Cambridgeport is south of Central Square along Magazine Street and Brookline Street. Harvard Square, formed by the junction of Massachusetts Avenue, Brattle Street, and JFK Street. This is the primary site of Harvard University, and is a major Cambridge shopping area. It is served by a Red Line station. Harvard Square was originally the northwestern terminus of the Red Line and a major transfer point to streetcars that also operated in a short tunnel, which is still a major bus terminal. Although the area under the square was reconfigured dramatically in the 1980s when the Red Line was extended, the Harvard Square area includes Brattle Square and Elliott Square. A short distance away from the square lies the Cambridge Common, while the neighborhood north of Harvard and east of Massachusetts Avenue is known as Agassiz in honor of the famed scientist Louis Agassiz. Porter Square, about a mile north on Massachusetts Avenue from Harvard Square, is formed by the junction of Massachusetts and Somerville Avenues, and includes part of the city of Somerville. It is served by the Porter Square Station, a complex housing a Red Line stop and a Fitchburg Line commuter rail stop. Lesley University's University Hall and Porter campus are located at Porter Square. Inman Square, at the junction of Cambridge and Hampshire Streets in mid-Cambridge. Inman Square is home to many diverse restaurants, bars, music venues and boutiques. The funky street scene still holds some urban flair, but was dressed up recently with Victorian streetlights, benches and bus stops. A new community park was installed and is a favorite place to enjoy some takeout food from the nearby restaurants and ice cream parlor. Lechmere Square, at the junction of Cambridge and First Streets, adjacent to the Cambridge Side Galleria shopping mall, perhaps best known as the northern terminus of the MBTA Green Line subway, at Lechmere Station. Image Gallery. Other neighborhoods. The residential neighborhoods in Cambridge border, but are not defined by the squares. These neighborhoods include: East Cambridge is bordered on the north by the Somerville border, on the east by the Charles River, on the south by Broadway and Main Street, and on the west by the Grand Junction Railroad tracks. It includes the North Point development. Mid-campus is bordered on the north by Broadway, on the south and east by the Charles River, and on the west by the Grand Junction Railroad tracks. Wellington-Harrington is bordered on the north by the Somerville border, on the south and west by Hampshire Street, and on the east by the Grand Junction Railroad tracks. Referred to as Midblock. The port is formerly known as Area 4, is bordered on the north by Hampshire Street, on the south by Massachusetts Avenue, on the west by Prospect Street, and on the east by the Grand Junction Railroad tracks. Residents of Area 4 often refer to the neighborhood simply as the port, and refer to the area of Cambridgeport and Riverside as the coast. In October 2015, the Cambridge City Council officially renamed Area 4 as the port. Cambridgeport is bordered on the north by Massachusetts Avenue, on the south by the Charles River, on the west by River Street, and on the east by the Grand Junction Railroad tracks. Mid-Cambridge is bordered on the north by Kirkland and Hampshire Streets and the Somerville border, on the south by Massachusetts Avenue, on the west by Peabody Street, and on the east by Prospect Street. Riverside, an area sometimes referred to as the coast, is bordered on the north by Massachusetts Avenue, on the south by the Charles River, on the west by JFK Street, and on the east by River Street. Agassiz is bordered on the north by the Somerville border, on the south and east by Kirkland Street, and on the west by Massachusetts Avenue. Neighborhood 9 Radcliffe is bordered on the north by railroad tracks, on the south by Concord Avenue, on the west by railroad tracks, and on the east by Massachusetts Avenue. The affluent Avon Hill sub-neighborhood consists of the higher elevations within the area bounded by Upland Road, Raymond Street, Linian Street and Massachusetts Avenue. Brattle area, West Cambridge is bordered on the north by Concord Avenue and Garden Street, on the south by the Charles River and the Watertown border, on the west by Fresh Pond and the Collins Branch Library, and on the east by JFK Street. It includes the sub-neighborhoods of Brattle Street and Huron Village. North Cambridge is bordered on the north by the Arlington and Somerville borders, on the south by railroad tracks, on the west by the Belmont border, and on the east by the Somerville border. Cambridge Highlands is bordered on the north and east by railroad tracks, on the south by Fresh Pond, and on the west by the Belmont border. Strawberry Hill is bordered on the north by Fresh Pond, on the south by the Watertown border, on the west by the Belmont border, and on the east by railroad tracks. Parks and outdoors consisting largely of densely built residential space. Cambridge lacks significant tracts of public parkland. This is partly compensated for, however, by the presence of easily accessible open space on the university campuses, including Harvard Yard, the Radcliffe Yard, and Mitt's Great Lawn, as well as the considerable open space of Mount Auburn Cemetery. At the western edge of Cambridge, the cemetery is well known as the first garden cemetery, for its distinguished inhabitants, for its superb landscaping, and as a first-rate arboretum. Although known as a Cambridge landmark, much of the cemetery lies within the bounds of Watertown. It is also a significant important bird area in the Greater Boston area. Public parkland includes the Esplanade along the Charles River, which mirrors its Boston counterpart, Cambridge Common, a busy and historic public park immediately adjacent to the Harvard campus, and the Alewife Brook Reservation and Fresh Pond in the western part of the city. Climate demographics. As of the census of 2010, there were 105,162 people, 44,032 households, and 17,420 families residing in the city. The population density was 16,354.9 people per square mile. There were 47,291 housing units at an average density of 7,354.7 per square mile. The racial makeup of the city was 66.60% white, 11.70% black or African American, 0.20% Native American, 15.10% Asian, 0.01% Pacific Islander, 2.10% from other races, and 4.30% from two or more races. 7.60% of the population were Hispanic or Latino of any race. Non-Hispanic whites were 62.1% of the population in 2010, down from 89.7% in 1970. An individual resident of Cambridge is known as a Cantabrigian. In 2010, there were 44,032 households, out of which 16.9% had children under the age of 18 living with them. 28.9% were married couples living together. 8.4% had a female householder with no husband present, and 60.4% were non-families. 40.7% of all households were made up of individuals, and 9.6% had someone living alone who was 65 years of age or older. The average household size was 2.00 and the average family size was 2.76. In the city, the population was spread out, with 13.3% of the population under the age of 18, 21.2% from 18 to 24, 38.6% from 25 to 44, 17.8% from 45 to 64, and 9.2% who were 65 years of age or older. The median age was 30.5 years. For every 100 females, there were 96.1 males. For every 100 females age 18 and over, there were 94.7 males. The median income for a household in the city was $47,979, and the median income for a family was $59,423. Males had a median income of $43,825 versus $38,489 for females. The per capita income for the city was $31,156. About 8.7% of families and 12.9% of the population were below the poverty line, including 15.1% of those under age 18 and 12.9% of those age 65 or over. Cambridge has been ranked as one of the most liberal cities in America. Locals living in and near the city jokingly refer to it as the People's Republic of Cambridge. For 2016, the residential property tax rate in Cambridge was $6.99 per $1,000. Cambridge enjoys the highest possible bond credit rating (AAA) with all three Wall Street rating agencies. In 2000, 11.0% of city residents were of Irish ancestry, 7.2% were of English, 6.9% Italian, 5.5% West Indian, and 5.3% German ancestry. 69.4% spoke only English at home, while 6.9% spoke Spanish, 3.2% Chinese or Mandarin, 3.0% Portuguese, 2.9% French Creole, 2.3% French, 1.5% Korean, and 1.0% Italian. Income data is from the 2009 to 2013 American Community Survey 5-year estimates.